Dining in restaurants, drinking in bars, going to the movies, all allowed again today in much of Ontario, and so too working out in a gym. Natalia Goodwin has more from Ottawa.
If you've been missing a regular workout today, you may be able to go back to your gym. Gyms are one of the establishments that are allowed to reopen with Stage 3. Now, looking in the windows of one of the Good Life Fitnesses here in Ottawa, it seems a lot quieter than it used to be. Now, that could be because you now have to book an appointment for your workout time. It's just one of the ways that gyms are readjusting to reopening. And now those for the little bit younger crowd who also need a workout, playground equipment is now open in city parks as well. One of the industries that's been hardest hit by this pandemic has been the hospitality industry. Now, patios here in the city have been packed since they were allowed to open last month, and now today you will be allowed to be served inside of restaurants as well. Now, that applies to bars too, and with that comes the opening of live art shows, including movie theaters. But one of Ontario's biggest movie theater chains has decided not to open. Cineplex will not be reopening today. They say that they have to continue to review the rules around Stage 3. Now, if you are planning a gathering, the amount of people you can invite has also gone up with Stage 3. You are now allowed 50 people inside and 100 people outside. But public health officials say that you still need to be continuing. We need to be diligent in following those rules, including social distancing. And of course, if you are heading out anywhere today, make sure you bring your mask, because many cities and towns still have a mandatory mask rule for indoor places in place. Natalia Goodwin, CBC News, Ottawa.
Joining me now to discuss the latest COVID-19 news is Craig Jenny. He's an infectious disease researcher, microbiologist, and immunologist. Joining me now from Calgary. Hello to you.
Good morning.
So we know most of Ontario, as mentioned, is now moving into Stage 3 today, and Calgary is a few steps ahead of Ontario. So I wonder, do you expect the province to see a spike in cases maybe 2 weeks from now?
Yeah, I'm not sure about a spike, but we would anticipate definitely an uptick in cases. The real question is, how big is that uptick? We are now, for example, in Alberta, seeing over the last week or so a pretty steady number of cases up around that 100 mark. And when we went to our phase 2 or 2+, we were down about a dozen or so cases a day. So there is a definite increase, but it looks like it's so far holding steady.
What kind of advice would you give businesses to lessen the risk of exposure to COVID-19?
I think the single biggest thing is to follow those remaining guidelines, and those seem to be the problem areas here in Alberta. When people forget that there is still physical distancing, when we are requested to wear masks and people ignore that, or when people choose to go in and, for example, pack a beach, we have seen an uptick in cases, and those seem to be the primary drivers in the community, is when people simply assume because a place is open, there are no further restrictions or guidelines in place.
And I know you've had trouble with some bars. We've seen the same thing in Montreal as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these places, you know, they're great to be able to go out and enjoy responsibly, but we have to keep in mind that physical distancing is our primary defense here. And if we pack a place, if we see patios that are full with no separation, obviously people aren't wearing masks if they're in a restaurant or a bar. These are really the problem areas that could lead to the spikes in the community. What goes hand in hand, though, is if we can keep our screening up, and that's really been a success story here in Alberta. The number of patients screened and the contact tracing has allowed us to keep most clusters pretty small and not let a large outbreak develop.
Earlier in the show today, we had two teachers on who felt that schools should fully reopen in September. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think September is awfully hard to predict at the moment. I think if we were to look in Ontario and even here in Alberta, you know, schools, if they were opening today, probably could do so safely. The real question is, where are we in September? So, as I said, we're holding about 100 cases a day here in Alberta. If those were to rise to 200 or 300, we probably have to reevaluate in-person schools at the time that they were scheduled to start. If we can hold the numbers where we are now, we can probably proceed with at least some form of in-person teaching.
We also had a gym owner from Ottawa on with questions about reopening and whether clients should wear masks in the gym. What do you think she should be doing?
Yeah, if the clients can, it's absolutely protective. I think we've been actually quite fortunate here in Alberta that we had a specific establishment who, prior to reopening, was directly challenging the rules and threatening to not follow any guidelines. And I think it put gyms in Alberta under the microscope. And as a result, most people are following the guidelines very tightly, and they seem to be working. So we have not had any direct clusters linked to gyms here in Alberta.
It certainly sounds as though the cleaning protocols are very strong. In other words, you have to book your time at the gym, and then the gym closes down for half an hour so that everything can be disinfected. I want to look at another part of the country now. Saskatchewan had a large spike in positive cases yesterday, and we're also seeing outbreaks in an Edmonton hospital and an NICU in Vancouver. And these places have been able to flatten the curve fairly early on. What is happening now, in your opinion?
So this is the highlight, that the virus is not gone. Although we can flatten the curve, as you pointed out, it is still in our community. And if we sort of let our guard down, it's when it comes back. The real threat, these hospital outbreaks and the NICU, the number of cases it might be quite small, but when the virus gets into these facilities where we have our most at-risk patients, that's unfortunately where the really negative outcomes come and we lose lives. So we can tolerate a small number of cases in the community, provided we can keep them out of these facilities. And every time we get one of these clusters or spikes, we get extremely concerned.
Craig, we appreciate your views on this morning. Thanks so much for your time.
Have a great day.
You too. Craig Jenny, an infectious disease researcher, microbiologist, and immunologist, joining us from Calgary.